And we're live. Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Deconversion Stories. I'm here today with Reason Over Religion, also known on Twitter as @Hubie0. Basically, what I'd like to hear, my friend, is go to the beginning when you first started. What was your childhood experiences like involved in the faith that you were involved in, and when you first started thinking to yourself that this can't be real, or something along those lines, and tell us about that point to the pathway where you decided to get involved with the atheist community and become somewhat of an advocate. So
sure, no problems. Well, I grew up one of 6 kids. My mother was Catholic, very devout, and we were brought along to Catholic churches for a very long time, up until I was about probably 10 years of age. Most of the time as a kid, obviously, you don't pay too much attention to the message there, but it's a situation where you're told that nothing that's told to you on a Sunday can be questioned. It's accurate, it's true. Anything to the contradiction of that is incorrect, basically.
Right.
And around about the age of 10, my father committed suicide, and we that was a pretty huge upheaval at that stage. He was a chronic alcoholic, and we owned a pub, of all things, which is a great thing to have for someone like that. And my mother went to one of these interfaith meetings where people from all different denominations turn up and have some kind of service. I wasn't there, but people from evangelical Christianity, Lutherans, Catholics, Baptists, you name it, they were all there. And she decided to become a born-again Christian. The church they had out here, I suppose they call Assemblies of God, but it's basically evangelical. Right. She came home from that, having been converted, and told us that we were a little bit wrong, not completely wrong, but just a little bit, and started to, the accurate word is indoctrination. She indoctrinated us with the new view of evangelical Christianity, and we bought it hook, line and sinker, having been to a Catholic school all the way along, and then I actually stayed there, which was interesting for a while. We moved from a country town to the city and started attending this Assemblies of God church. And
what was that like?
Oh, it was very much the way it can be portrayed on some of the televangelist shows. Our church wasn't that big, but it started off with musical numbers. We had a piano, a bass player. I actually ended up teaching myself to play the drums, so I didn't have to sit in the pews.
Awesome.
And do the singing. Yeah. So that got me out of a little bit of the ritual. So it was, songs of praise, all that sort of stuff, a bit of rock music thrown in. And sure. Then the preacher would go into his sermon, and we'd be all sitting there listening to his interpretation of that book we like to criticise. Round about
his
the age
interpretation. I like how you said that. His interpretation.
Well, it's very much what it is, isn't it? You can throw a blanket over 100 Christians, and you'll have 20 different interpretations of the same passage. That was part of my thinking in the end, which I'll get to. About the time I was 18, my mother decided to move interstate, and my 4 sisters went along with her. I decided to remain in the town I'm still living in now. And my brother, who lives in special care, he's autistic, severe Down syndrome, and almost deaf. He's nearly 40 now himself, but he's never spoken a word in his life. So I stayed in Melbourne, stay in touch with him and with my father's side of the family, who I was close to. So I went to church maybe 2 or 3 times after Mum moved out or moved interstate. And then I discovered Sunday sleep-ins. They were great, yeah. I didn't know the benefits of sleeping beyond 8 o'clock on a Sunday morning.
Right.
I didn't really give my beliefs much thought after that. I still felt that, I believed all the same things I was told as a youngster. And it wasn't until I met the person who ended up marrying, and we got serious about having children, that I started to think about things. She'd never been raised with religion at all, and mentioned the idea of if we had kids, she'd want to get them baptised. And I surprised myself with how quickly I jumped on that in a negative way and said, well, that'd be rather hypocritical. I don't go to church. You don't go to church. I don't see the point. And that was really the trigger for me. I started thinking about what I mentioned earlier. I'm listening to one guy's interpretation of a book that's written a very long time ago. How do I know he's got it right? Started to read through the Bible again. I'd read it cover to cover as a believer, and every time I picked out a passage, it just seemed contradictory to the notion of a loving creator. So I started to discard,
especially the Old Testament.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and even at that point, I was still very homophobic because that stuff was really driven in hard. Pardon the pun. As a kid, those sorts of people were disgusting and abominations and all that sort of stuff. But I sort of started discarding the Bible idea. But because I was ignorant to most of modern science, physics, astronomy, astrophysics, biology, all that sort of thing, I started coming up with the deist kind of thing. Came to it myself, going, well, I don't know how everything got started, but surely that there was some sort of creative force that got the universe rolling, and then hands off, just walked away from the whole project. And I stuck with that for a while until, and I don't know who it was, but somebody put me onto Richard Dawkins. And I started voraciously consuming his content on YouTube, a lot of the debates he did, the talks he's done, some of the documentaries he's filmed. I then bought his book, The God Delusion, and have stumbled across a fair quantity of other authors like your Sam Harris's, your Christopher Hitchens, Daniel Dennett, all these sorts of people.
It's almost as if you went down the same path that I did. Started with the same four guys.
Yeah,
and then moved into other things.
They call them the Four Horsemen for very good reason, actually.
Exactly.
And no matter how you try to dissect what they say, you can't come up with a way to logically refute how they talk about things and how they pull apart religion. And the nails in the coffin there were what they had to say. Once I learned about evolution by natural selection and the fact that most of our religiosity comes from our parents or our geography, it's pretty clear to see almost everything that we look at is a man-made construct, and from a religious perspective at least. And people who are raised secularly but come to religion later in life, it's almost always after a moment of trauma or grief. It certainly marries well with how my mother switched from Christianity to being evangelical. It's incredible to me how many people find religion when they lose a loved one or they go to prison. It's always a vulnerability where they find comfort in the idea of they can cast the guilt that they feel from whatever it is they've done or whatever they've suffered through and throw it on the shoulders of a being, whether it's imaginary or not. They obviously find it very comforting. And I can't find any other logical way that people will come to believe in the type of things that I used to.
It doesn't seem logical, because now that we're free and clear of those beliefs, it's like looking back on as if you had believed in some of the Mother Goose fairy tales that you were read as a child too. Because to me, that's kind of what they sound like. They just sound like every other mythology that I've ever heard.
Oh, absolutely.
You're talking about a book that starts out with a talking snake and ends with a talking seven-headed dragon. Like, what the fuck is this about?
Oh, I want to know where that dude is. I know there's a new Godzilla movie coming out fairly soon, and it's got three-headed dragon in it. But to give you an idea of how gullible or duped, my family and I were, my mother told us a story around the dinner table one day that two people were found in the ice, and it was a man and a woman. They were thousands of years old, and the scientists were certain that they were Adam and Eve. And she asked us to figure out why they knew that. And, again, I was 10 or 11, scratching my head trying to come up with an answer, and eventually gave up. And she says, well, they had no belly buttons. And because Adam and Eve were created, they couldn't possibly have had belly buttons. And I took that I took that word, and I went, well, there's just another thing that proves God's real, and he made people and he made everything. And that really, it shows you how powerful indoctrination is, because it, as everybody knows, it teaches you what to think instead of how to think.
Yes.
I didn't really start developing that ability to critically think and be analytical about extraordinary claims until, I was inching towards my 30s.
Yeah, I probably around the same time, mid-30s, is when I finally tossed it all away, because I went from I was raised Jewish myself, so I went from that sort of belief system, which I kind of, I remember always having the questions in my head as a kid myself, and not really believing really. I thought, well, maybe, and I would, once in a while, I'd ask for a favor and nothing would ever happen, obviously. But I went from that into like, the weird stuff like Wicca and witchcraft and all the weird paranormal-y stuff. And after that phase, I finally just was like, I can't back any of that shit up either. So it was clear and free and clear. And that was probably towards the end of mine as well, like you.
Yeah, it seems like a constant downward slope. A little bit over time, you go from the more fundamental extreme parts to the more, I suppose you could call them spiritual parts, and until pretty much everything washes away under the weight of reason and logic. It seems to be a very, very common theme. I've just finished reading Tim Sledge's book. You may have seen him on Twitter.
I'm going to be talking to him in a couple of weeks, actually.
Oh, fantastic! Yeah, I've been communicating with a bit in the last week or so. I've just finished his book, and it's a fascinating journey. And I highly recommend reading the book. It's very clear that people of faith they're no different to us in terms of their proclivities, the errors they make. They're human beings just like us. They just add an enormous amount of guilt and shame upon their heads because they think they're offending against their particular deity. And the churches they go to they run like businesses. They have business models. They have to be grown. They have to invest. They have to expand. Things are voted on. Being called to be a preacher in a church is not someone walking up going, "I'm going to be your next pastor." Everyone has to vote on it. They have to go before a committee. So to suggest there's some divine intervention in that kind of process is a bit ridiculous as well. But yeah, his book was absolutely fascinating. I actually recently wrote him about a 3-page sort of story, which is a bit more of an expanded version of what we've been talking about. And yeah, he was quite interested in that. So I've often thought of writing a bit of a book myself because I've only given you a very short snippet of what it was like growing up myself with that many other siblings and such a fiercely religious parent.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about that. I mean, when have you sort of like said to your mom that you are no longer a believer, that you've become an atheist, like full on?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, that was explosive, put it that way.
Okay. Talk about that a little bit. Like, how does she deal with you now?
Look, I still love my mum. Most people do. She hasn't done anything terrible to me, but it's difficult to talk about things that go beneath the surface. We can only scratch the surface conversationally speaking these days. But the point at which she learned I didn't believe anymore, I can remember it very distinctly. It was about 5 or 6 years ago only. She was still under the impression I was a believer even then. And we were on the way home from visiting my disabled brother, and I had my 2 kids in the back of the car. And they would have been about, 7 and 3, somewhere around at that age.
Okay.
And she'd asked if I'd taken them to church. And I said, well, no. And she said, well, how long has it been since you've been to church? And I said, what we say, nearly 20 years. And she goes, you haven't been to church? No. Well, why not? I don't believe in that anymore. And if someone's jaw could have literally hit the floor of the car, it would have been her.
Wow.
She was shocked. And her first reaction, not thinking necessarily that I was a lost cause already, but her first thought was to my children. She said, who's going to teach them about Jesus? And I said, well, when they're old enough to think for themselves and they want to learn about the concept of religion, I'll teach them that. But I'll teach them about Christianity and Islam and Hinduism and all the main religions I've learned a bit about. Sure. And if they're interested, then I'll allow them to walk that path if they want to, but I'm not going to force anything upon them. And she goes to me, well, they're not going to know the right way. And I said, as far as I'm concerned, there isn't a right way. And what she said after that has stuck with me ever since. She said, well, it's my right as their grandmother to teach them about Jesus. And I just about crashed the car, and I said, well, it's my right as their father to tell you to shut the fuck up. And, and for a few years after that, she still tried to sneak a few things in. I eventually got the God conversation out of things with her and my children. She doesn't see them often because she lives 3,000 kilometres away.
Oh, wow.
Even
that's like the other side.
Yeah, I'm in Melbourne in Victoria, which is the southernmost part of Australia, not including Tasmania, the mainland. And my mother lives in Queensland, which is almost at the most northern point. And ironically, we've got her weather at the moment. It's in your money, it's 104 degrees here at the moment.
Yeah, and you're actually wearing clothes.
Air conditioner.
Ah, nice.
Yeah,
nice.
You know, it's too hairy to have the shirt off. So I still got birthday cards and those sorts of things from her with, I pray that God gives you a good year and all that sort of stuff. And I eventually just wrote to her and said, look, leave the religion out. I know you love the kids, but just wish them a happy birthday and tell them you love them. Leave Jesus out of it. She did that. And, we did have a time where we tried to talk about our differences in belief. And it ended up with my mother standing upright and storming to the entrance to the room where she was sleeping in at my house and pointed at me, you will bow before Jesus on Judgment Day. No, it's going to be the other way around because I've got a few questions for that bloke. Unfortunately, she's got a lot of time to herself. She's 70 years old now and subscribes to a lot of the conspiracy theories that you find on the internet. The moon landings were faked, the chemtrail conspiracy theory, you may have heard of that. She subscribes to that.
Oh, yeah. Really?
Obama is a secret Muslim and all this sort of thing. And I think the thing that triggered my mother with this big argument we had, which is why we don't converse about religion anymore, is we were watching the news and it showed a bunch of these little female children walking around in the full Muslim headdress. They've only got the fly screen they can look through. And, she was shaking her head at it. And I said, and I have to admit, I launched this particular assault. I said, it's a shame what indoctrination does to kids, isn't it? And she nods her head and goes, oh, yes. And I said, well, it's just the same thing that happens in Christianity. And, the hackles went up immediately. And she launched into a tirade about, she didn't indoctrinate anyone and that sort of thing. And, we started discussing the Bible. And I said, well, almost none of it is factually based. And I mentioned the early passages in, I think it's Genesis or Exodus, where there's one line that says there were giants in the earth in those days. And so she jumps ahead immediately and shows a picture of two archaeologists with a huge thigh bone that's about 7 feet long. And I said, that's a hoax, Mum. She goes, no, it's not. This is proof that there were giants. And I showed her the article where the two fellas who took the photo actually said, this is a hoax we perpetrated to show how gullible people were. And even once I showed her that, still would not accept it. So it's very difficult.
Cognitive dissonance.
Yeah, it's cognitive dissonance at its best, or willful ignorance coupled in with it. She won't accept anything that contradicts what the Bible says.
Reese, chemtrails are real. Sorry, I'm glancing down at the chat, so I'm staying sort of.
Oh yeah, sure.
In case anyone throws questions up for you or something like that, right? So, Reese, and he's kidding, of course. Reese is just like that. We got all the other Aussies on board here. Terry's in the audience here. Nacho Witness is here. Klaus is here, who I've actually interviewed most of these guys except for Terry yet. But,
no, tell Terry to have a go at it. It's good fun.
Oh, he'll eventually bow down to me, so to speak. I'll get him in here at some point. But So what is your relationship with your mom like now? Now that you guys have sort of settled all that stuff, is it better?
Oh, look, no, it's not better. It's not like it was because my mother's beliefs basically define her. That is probably 75-80% of who she is. And as I said a few minutes ago, when we talk about things, we can only really scratch on the surface, because if we talk about anything meaningful or, for want of a better term, spiritual, it all goes back to her belief systems. And it's something obviously we have pretty much zero common ground on. And even if you talk politically, and I was never interested in politics until Donald Trump took office over there in the United States. I know you're in Canada.
Don't worry, we fear the guy too. So
yeah, I think you must be building a wall to keep him out.
You would believe how many tweets I've read on Twitter where some Americans actually want to build a wall to keep us out too. They want to build a Canadian side wall as well. And I'm like, go for it. I'll tell you what, why don't you guys build a wall all the way around your country, and the rest of us will start filling it up with water.
That's a great idea. And how are they going to get to Alaska anyway?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, Alaska's like the distant cousin. You can't get to them except going through you guys.
Exactly. Just you try it.
Oh yeah, Canadians are about as offensive and difficult to deal with as Australians are. I think it's a bit of a misnomer that the United States needs to be protected from.
Yeah, I think that's why I found, anyways, ever since I noticed many Aussies that have moved here or came up here to work during Expo '86 back in the day. I think Aussies and Canadians have this kind of odd brotherhood between us, because we're like the escapees from the crown and stuff like that, right? We're the ones that got away and started our own little communes or something.
Yeah, I only see three differences: the climate, the accent, and the wildlife.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good way to put it. I like that.
So no, yeah, talking to Mum, if I talk about what's happening with my family up there, we talk about the weather. That's about all you can talk about, sort of thing. I talk about my children's accomplishments when they have little milestones here and there, but it doesn't really get much beyond there. It's an interesting situation, and we were disciplined very, very tough. I mean, the way that we were punished as kids could be construed as assault these days, and it's not unusual for people my age or older to have gone through that kind of corporal punishment. And it was always, I think the last time we spoke about that, my mum will always make the excuse of, well, you guys turned out all right. And I said, well, yeah, that's probably despite the punishment rather than because of it. Or the other one is, well, I never hit you in anger. And the last time she said that to me, I said, well, you should have told your face. Because there were a few times I turned around to watch as the backswing was coming towards me, and it wasn't a look of love, I can tell you.
You weren't smiling.
No. She would have scared the Hulk away, I reckon. But it's
my favorite was always the it's going to hurt me more than it hurts you.
Oh yeah,
I got that a few times. I'm like, I'll put money on that it's the other way around, pal.
Oh, there were times when wooden implements were broken, so metal ones were resorted to. But probably one of the worst punishments. The worst punishment. I don't know if anyone listening has had this one before, but the hot chilies. We had a walk-in pantry, and Mum had a little jar about yay big of about the hottest chilies you could find. They must have been cooked up by the devil. I reckon they were that hot. And if we told a lie, a whole heaped teaspoon was on the tongue, and it would sit there for up to 5 minutes before we were allowed to dispose of it. And disposing of it constituted having to swallow it down. And that was not fun. I'm surprised I can taste anything nowadays.
Yeah, right. I think that's probably because I think my mom tried that on us a couple of times until she realized she never really did much to my sister, because my sister was the little angel and I was the troublemaker usually. But I had that happen a couple times, but she stopped doing it when she realized that I actually had a liking for spicy food. So it wasn't working anymore. Yeah, wasabi's a breeze, man.
I probably cop an unusually large share of the discipline, because my four sisters, if ever Mum was working, and she was working a lot, she had to work 2 to 3 jobs to pay off the debt my father left behind after he died. So we were all home alone, and if something was broken or somebody did something wrong and Mum comes home, who did that? 4 fingers were pointed at me, so the weight of evidence was against me, and I usually copped the hiding for it. So, yeah. I
Poor guy.
Yeah. You know how a guitar player's fingers get nice and calloused and strong from playing a guitar for years and years? That's probably what my arse cheeks are like, I reckon.
Well, if we ever need a battering ram, I know who to grab.
Yeah, don't use my head. Use the other end.
Yes, that's
right. To knock down that wall Trump bills.
That's right. We'll call it a buttering ram. Well, I think this one's empty. I'm going to have to grab another one here.
Oh, that's a good idea.
I mean, it's probably a little early for you. Well, no, you're probably in the afternoon now there by now.
It's the afternoon, and it's 40 degrees Celsius, so I think it's worthy of alcohol.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I agree. I was already in agreement, as you can tell, right? So, And I got my little cooler here, so all good. Because I don't have a beer fridge in my room, but I really should think about maybe investing in one.
I need one in my garage. That would be very handy.
All right. So when you did you have a lot of like friends in the neighborhood that were also kind of quite religious that may have abandoned you once they found out that you were sort of a non-believer and later in life?
No, not at all. It was probably a bit different for me because we were in the financial dire straits we were after my father passed. We had to move house a very large number of times. So I went to 6 schools, from primary school to high school. I went to 6 different schools, and it was very, very difficult to continually make friends. So I didn't have that many. And probably I did have one secular mate when I was at probably my most fundamental, who I desperately tried to convert. I think I failed miserably, which is good for him. Yeah, didn't have a huge bunch of friends to abandon me, if that makes any sense. You know, I've got one friend who lives in the same state as my mum, ironically, nowadays, who I first met in my 3rd to last year of high school, and we're still good mates. And I've got a mate who I used to work with at a former job that I haven't been at for 18 odd years. But other than that, it's mostly work colleagues and that sort of stuff. And my workmates are very much the same as me, but probably not outspoken at all. I'm rather outspoken. And anyone who reads my Twitter feed knows I have plenty to say about people who, try and posit myths as facts.
Right. Oh, by the way, guys, if you're watching this and you don't follow our Reason Over Religion here, his Twitter handle is @Hubie0, which is also in the description below. Do you have a YouTube channel? I forgot to ask you that.
I do, but I haven't actually used it. I've never attempted anything like what's going on now or recording any videos. There's only a few videos on my YouTube channel of ancient British motorbikes because I do those up as a hobby in my spare time. So there's a little bit of footage of me looking rather goofy, but I'm a self-taught motorcycle mechanic, and
that's great, dude.
Yeah, I do restoration jobs in my spare time, which I don't have much of, but I love doing that.
Yeah, awesome. That's amazing. I got that does exactly the same thing in his backyard, and he's got quite a few. We'll call them bodies or skeletons of bikes strewn about his place that he pulls pieces from that he needs to rebuild. He also into the British bikes like you are as well, especially Triumph. So.
Oh, okay. Now I'm in a bit of a much rarer group. If you can read the T-shirt, it's that's the brand. I've got one in the garage out the back here that's 63 years old, and they only made 1,000 of that model, and mine is the only one up and running in this country, so it's quite rare.
Wow, that's pretty cool, actually. If you've got the only one in the country, you ever get any offers for that or what?
I do. I've turned every one of them down so far. The company's actually releasing their first twin cylinder since 1970. And I rode one for the first time yesterday, actually, and I'm picking up mine hopefully by the end of this week. So I'll have a new one and an old one in the shed, but I've only got 3 bikes once the new one comes at the moment. I used to have 9, but I had to sell them off.
Sell a few? Oh yeah, okay, sure.
Yeah, look, I probably would still have had them, but we outgrew our old house. It was only a very small dwelling, and our children getting bigger and more toys and all that sort of thing. So the wife and I made the decision to knock our old house down and build a bigger property on the same land. So I had to clear out some space and clear out some funds to help pay for the demolition and construction and all that. So I was happy to do that anyway.
Well, really, how many do you need, really? Once you built them, you've had your fun with them. You could probably sell a few.
I still need 9, I reckon.
You still need 9. One for every day of the week at least, right? And a couple of special ones for like birthdays or Christmas or something.
You don't eat baked beans for dinner every night, do you?
Well, no, that's all right. Valid point.
It's variety, yeah.
That is the spice of life, so they say. I like to make these. Actually, I know who they are. I'm friends with them. I don't know if you know who he is. The ominous they. He's a great guy.
No, I don't know that one.
Well, yeah, he's a good one. If you can find him on Twitter, he's a good one to follow. He's kind of disappeared the past little while, but he kind of gave us forewarning that he was going to do that anyways, that he was going to be quite busy. But I've yet to get him on my show too, but he has promised to do so at some point.
Yeah.
I've often heard that the most deadliest animals in the world are down in Australia. So do you ever find any of these, like these horrid spiders that crawl into your place? Do you have to watch out for that kind of stuff where you are?
Oh, look, I'm in suburbia more so. There's a mountain range only 10 kilometres or 6 miles from my house. You get a few of them there. We get redback spiders. You'd probably call them black widows.
Well, they're related.
Yeah, I've found a couple here and there, but when I used to live out in the country, and I used to live on the surf coast where they hold the Bells Beach surfing contest and all that sort of stuff, and you would get tiger snakes out there, other venomous snakes, the spiders, all that sort of stuff. But it's probably much more northern and central Australia that have the more dangerous animals. I can go for a bike ride probably 2 miles from my house, and you got to watch out for kangaroos in the morning, sort of thing. But they're only dangerous if you hit them.
Try not to do that.
No, that's right. But no, look, it's probably only, I've been in the house I've got now since 2003, and I've found probably 4 or 5 venomous spiders in that time, and only 1 redback. So it's not bad. Yeah, but when you're living in a much more bushland environment, it's not unusual to find snakes, lizards, those sorts of things fairly commonly.
Well, we've got our share of venomous animals here, even in Canada we do. And a lot of people don't know this, but we actually have, I think, 6 different species of scorpions here in Canada, which sounds weird because you think of scorpions as desert dwelling, but we have areas, especially in the Okanagan here, where it's similar topography to a desert, right? It's just more mountainous and hilly. But yeah, there's sandy areas, and there's 6 different species that we have. None of them are deadly, but they're going to make you pretty sick. Well, one of them in particular will make you quite sick if you get stung by them. I've yet to even see one. So I don't know. They're that rare, but they're still here, which is kind of weird.
Well, we do get marine life that's a bit dangerous from time to time as well. You know, like we spend a bit of time on the surf coast. Yeah, and the blue-ringed octopus and that sort of thing. I went surfing with a friend a few years ago down on the surf coast, and we were waiting to catch a wave, and I had about a 6-foot shark swim underneath me and brush past my leg. And I turned to my friend who hadn't been surfing with me before, and I said, just catch the next wave, make it in nice and gently to shore. He goes, why is that? I said, well, there's a 6-footer under. I don't know what it is, but it's a shark sort of thing. And he paddled like mad, making all the noise and the splashing and all that sort of thing. And
which is what you don't do.
Exactly. I'm screaming at him just to lie still. So I caught the next wave, and I think I was waiting nearly 5 minutes for him to get to shore. He throws his board on the ground. He goes, I'm never surfing again. And he hasn't.
See, man, I haven't surfed since since I lived in Israel, actually. So, and there wasn't huge surf there. It was more boogie boarding type thing. But we can here in Canada, off the coast of Vancouver Island, they have some pretty big waves in Tofino, which is, I know there's a place in California called Tofino as well, but it's our Canadian version. It's like we're like Hollywood North up here or something. Everything's almost California, just in the Canadian.
Right.
Across our border, right? Because we got all the shows are filmed up here now, like all the like Arrow and the Flash and all those guys are all filmed up here now. So we've got some pretty good surf off the coast of Vancouver Island. But it's been years since I've even to do it, and it used to be so much fun. And I tell you, man, I got to get down to Australia at some point and do some surfing down there, because that's the shit right there. And I hear off the coast of Africa as well is pretty good.
Well, you know a few Aussies now, mate, so I'm sure any of us will be happy to accommodate you if you come on down.
That'd be awesome. Yeah, because I want to come and do the circuit down there and hang out with all the boys I've met, or boys, girls, whoever that I've met on doing this and becoming the activist that, well, not that I'm much of an activist, but I do this because it's important, I think, for people that are questioning and that are on the fence. If they hear these stories, it might help them transition away from nonsensical beliefs to a much more reasoned life. right? So I hope that I can help in that fashion.
Yeah, I agree. There's only so much you can accomplish in 280 characters, and you don't have you can't get the sincerity, the tone of voice, and you can't actually speak to somebody face to face. And I think we all get guilty from time to time when we see some of the silly things that people post on replying with things that might not be so conducive to having people think about their position so much, rather than just attacking the ridiculousness of what people say. And I'm guilty of that myself, but I do try to be as reasoned as I can. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But no, I agree. It goes to show how many of us there actually are. There's a lot more people who are in my position and people who, especially in places like the States, who have become atheists or always were atheists that can't actually say that they are because of the way that they're treated or viewed over there. And
that's true.
That's something that needs to change.
Our numbers are growing, which is a good thing. So my friend Klaus wanted me to ask you if you ever drink VB, whatever that is.
Victoria Bitter. It's a beer, and yes, I do.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. And somebody's like, VB, what's that? Virgin babies? No, we save those for the special occasions. Virgin babies.
We roast
do we know any? Yeah, but do we know any non-virgin babies? Like, what the hell does that mean?
Yeah, VB was the most popular beer down here for a very long time, being in Victoria. But I prefer the Tasmanian beers. Actually, they're a bit nicer to me. But I drink more spirits than I drink beer.
Oh, do you? All right. See, I'm a big beer enthusiast, as a matter of fact. Yeah. See, what I'm drinking a Pilsner. It's a relatively inexpensive one that we sell here. But it's made here, so that's kind of. Yeah, I like to support the local businesses.
Yeah, our local complex has opened up a German place called the Bavarian, and they've got about 24 German beers on tap there, and I've been slowly sampling those, and the Germans make a really nice beer, I have to say.
Oh, they do. They do.
Yeah, because if you drink more than 2 cans of VB, you feel like you're 6 months pregnant, and you don't get that from a German beer. It's good.
It's almost like when I have too many Guinnesses or Newcastles.
Yeah.
Wow, I'm kind of bloated now. I think the due date's in about 3 months.
Yeah, you don't need a flotation device once you're out in the ocean.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. By the way, guys, I'm going to do a little bit of a shout out here. Sorry to interrupt our conversation for this, but I kind of fallen in love with a channel that's fairly recently gotten started, and his name's Hops Watch, and he does beer reviews. Which I think is helpful, especially when he pulls in beers that I've never even heard of or even tried. So I get a little bit of an idea, because his tastes that I've seen so far seem to be quite similar to my own. I mean, I like beers in all the categories, but like you get your Pilsners, your lagers, your ales, your light ales, your dark ales, your porters, your stouts. I like all of them, and I'll try them all. But this guy gives some great reviews. And he's a fellow long hair like me, so go give him a sub on YouTube. He's got some really good content. He's only got a few videos up right now.
But I used to have hair that long, but I don't have hair anymore, and I'm not allowed to have long hair in my job anyway, or even a beard.
Yeah, I can. I'm one of those science guys, like what do you call it? I'm a chemist. We'll just put it that way. And I play with all kinds of chemicals and stuff. So, and people look at me and go, "You're a chemist? What? You don't look like a chemist." I go, "Well, yeah, that's my day job. Most of the time, I'm a musician, so I kind of look more like that than I do."
The public would be shocked if I turned up to work with that kind of hair these days. So I can't do it.
So Klaus, I'm a beer guy. Utah beer sucks. Utah beer, most American beer sucks. We have a joke, dude. It's called, what the difference between or what is it? What the heck? Fuck you. I hate it. I get ahead of myself here, and then I stumble over my words. American beer is like making love in a canoe. It's fucking close to water. But Klaus wants me to let him know in Sydney that he's in Sydney for many years. I don't know why. Klaus, you want to expand on your comment there, because it kind of doesn't make sense. So I just interviewed him recently. So
I have been trying to. I've been thinking about it. It hasn't gone past thought, but there are a few people who I've met on Twitter now that are in Melbourne. So they're all in close proximity, and I wouldn't mind, look, I don't want to get some kind of stonecutters organisation going, but just having a get together in a pub, having a chat would, I think it'd be really interesting. So I should get off my ass and try and get a bit of enthusiasm for that drummed up so that we can organise a day to go somewhere. I think that'd be pretty good.
Yeah, it would be. Like, start your own little, atheist humanist community down there that you guys could meet up every once in a while.
Yeah.
That would be awesome, actually. And dude, I've been wanting to go to Australia for a long time now. It's just every time I save up enough to do something like that, something stupid happens in my life where I need to take that and put it towards whatever. Like my car goes all fucking berserk, or a friend of mine is kicked out of the house and I need to give him some money so he can resettle, which I've done before. That kind of thing. So.
Oh, things always get in the way. Yeah, like I've just had to fork out a fair sum of money because my son's too good at sport and he's going over to New Zealand to compete in volleyball at a year level higher than what he is himself. So I've just had to get a passport and pay for everything there. So, but that's something that you do willingly. But I'd love to go. I've got my wife's got an aunt in Canada, somewhere in Victoria, I think, and
right near me.
We'd love to go up there, and I wouldn't mind going to the States just to fly the Millennium Falcon more than anything else. Huge Star Wars fan. And
me too.
Have a look around there, go to an NBA game, go to an NFL game, that sort of thing. And the Smithsonian, I'd love to go to the Smithsonian. I reckon that'd be fascinating.
Oh, yes, it is. I've been there. It's amazing. It's some really cool stuff. Oh, Klaus doesn't like German beer. Well, that's okay. We'll drink your German beer then, Klaus.
With a name like Klaus.
Yeah, right. Exactly. I was kind of just thinking that when you said that. Anyway, so we're getting close to the edge of the hour here. Is there anything else that you kind of wanted to bring up that we might not have covered?
Nothing comes to mind really. I've told a condensed version of my sort of childhood beginning journey to deconversion, that sort of thing. I'm sure we could probably talk for hours of the more fundamental aspects about it, and the reasons why I don't believe, and all the problems I found with religion, no matter which one they are. But that could go on for hours, really. But no, I think I've given a pretty good impression as to why I don't believe in stories like that anymore. And
sure,
I think it's suffice it to say, probably two things I didn't touch on is I don't fear death anymore. That was a huge thing for me.
I don't either. Did you carry the whole hell thing with you for a little while though afterwards? Or?
There were two things that were the hardest to give up. Was the fear of hell. I don't fear death. I don't. I could probably honestly say I fear dying because I don't want it to be painful. But being the dead part, don't have a problem with it. And you certainly have a much greater appreciation for the world around you when you realise that you're only going to have one go at it.
It's not a dress rehearsal.
No, that's right. And the other thing was how easy it was to give up the homophobia side of me. I was just able to look at that in a very simple, logical way. And the thoughts that went through my head, as crass as it sounds, is I'm not into dick, but who cares if two other blokes are? They're not doing it in front of me. And it was as simple as that. As soon as I ran that thought through my head, it's not hurting me. It doesn't affect me in any way. I care. Let people be with who they want. And
love is love. It doesn't matter who you love. It's still love.
100%. And I've actually got a work colleague I mentioned that to, who is gay. We spoke about it about 6 months ago. And I told her how horribly homophobic I was and how easy it was to give up. And, she cried. She was that happy that people were able to see that there's absolutely nothing wrong with it, that it's not a choice. I mean, who would choose to go through a life of ridicule and people turning their nose up at you and calling you all kinds of horrible things? No one would choose that lifestyle. So we had a big hug over it, and, we get along better than ever before. So it shows anybody can grow if they actually, look at the world with an open mind and, with some good critical faculties behind them.
100% agree. And, I don't know if I would have called myself at any point homophobic, but I used to make fun back in the day when I was younger and stupider, right? I would make fun of them. Like, or even my friends and you fag or whatever we call each other, something like that, right?
Yeah.
I don't so much do that anymore. but I've never really had a hate on for them. It's just, to me, it just seemed weird and funny. So we used to deal with it that way. Humor always is the way many people deal with things that are upsetting to them, I guess. Not really upsetting, because it never really upset me or anything. But
it's actually a good tool to deal with trauma as well.
Sure.
We call it black humor down here, and it's a tool that's employed in my line of work almost on a daily basis. If you have a bad day, you need that kind of humor. But
Sure.
I suppose I was a little bit further along than yourself, just with how fundamental my upbringing was, and I was actually repulsed by people like that. I didn't want to go near them, and I think it would be unfair to. I wouldn't say that I'm ashamed of thinking that way, because I had no choice. I had no education otherwise. But I'm certainly very glad I gave that rubbish up at the same time.
Exactly. That's kind of the same way I look at it too. But we're also influenced by our family members and friends that surround us that have that attitude, and it kind of washes off on you or rubs off on you, right? So
absolutely.
You end up adopting that sort of thing. And like, I'm glad many years I've been free and clear of that sort of thought for years now. So and
that's why they call it the 4 to 14
we're
window.
all humans. Yeah.
You got to get them. You got to get them young. Otherwise, it just doesn't survive that kind of any kind of process like that. Any belief system, any ideology that doesn't comport with reality is going to fall apart if you don't drum it into somebody very young or someone very vulnerable.
That's right. All right, someone that's even as an adult that's willing to accept that kind of shit too, right? It's easier to do that.
And as we've said, that's more often a product of a lack of education and someone going through some pretty traumatic time. They can find some comfort in something. It just because it's comforting, it doesn't mean it's real.
That's true. And I've often told people, anything that you can get in that respect through any religious belief, you can also get through secular means. So there are other options without having to fall for the nonsense.
So, 100%. And there's no ulterior motive. We're not trying to recruit members to our cause. We're not trying to get people to donate money to a church and read Bibles and convert to some religion. There isn't anything, I agree, there isn't anything a secular organisation can do that a religious one, a religious organisation could do that a secular one can't.
Exactly. We're out there doing the same things they are, even as we speak.
Oh, that's right.
There's many organizations that do that sort of thing. Well, my friend, I think we've had a really good conversation, and we can continue this if you're up for it. I often do an after party when I do these shows.
I noticed that.
I invite a few of my friends in. If you're willing, you put up about another hour or so if you're up for it. Go
for it.
Okay. Well, guys, we'll shut this one down a little bit early. I think we sort of ran the gamut of the stuff we wanted to talk about, plus a few bonus things like poisonous animals, but that's always interesting to me. And motorbikes and stuff, because that's cool too. I mean, everybody says I look like a biker, but I haven't had a bike since the 80s, so I'm not exactly a biker.
You might have to fix that up then.
I know, that's everybody tells me that. He goes, you look like you need to have one. And at some point, I would probably consider getting one. I hate my car. I'd much rather have a bike. It's so much more freedom to me, anyways.
That's the closest you can get to flying. The closest you can get to flying without leaving the ground.
Yeah, that's what my buddy Todd always says too. He goes, "This is my ground-based airplane." It's like I could just fly down the highway, and there you go. All right, guys. So I'll post the link for the after party in the Neil's Usual Suspects group. And by the way, as I see by your little thing there, I don't want to dox you, so I'll talk about this with you once we are not live. I'll post a link in my Usual Suspects group, and of course I'll give you one beforehand.
Sure.
And if you're up for hanging out with me and Reason Over Religion, feel free to. Reese wants me to send nudes. I don't have any, dude, but I'm really not in the mood to start stripping down just to take pictures for you. I'm sorry.
I don't want it to get dark in here. That's not necessary.
Exactly, right? I got to refresh my beer anyways. So, all right, give me a few minutes. I'm going to go run out and have a quick cigarette, and then I'll send you a fresh link, and we'll get the after party going.
Sounds good.
In the meantime, thank you so much, dude, for doing this. It's been fantastic. And
thanks for having me.
Oh, dude, you're an awesomely cool guy. Like, you're the kind of guy that, like, if we lived in the neighborhood, I guarantee you we'd be hanging out together. Especially if you're fixing
smashed.
bikes. Yeah, if you're fixing bikes, I'd be like, I want to ride one, man. Let me ride one. But anyway,
anytime.
Well, I'll make my way down there eventually. It's going to happen.
You'll have to look me up.
Oh, definitely. Well, we'll do that well before I head down there for sure. And if you got a spare room, I'll just crash on the fucking living room floor.
We got room.
Oh, I'm roboting. Hang on. There we go. Okay, I'm back. All right, guys. Thanks again for tuning in, everybody. Hope you enjoyed this conversation. If you did, see, here we go. Did you hear any of that?
I heard part of it, but it started getting sketchy.
Yeah, it happens. It's that time of night here where everyone starts using the same. Yeah, see, I'm getting choppy. Hang on, give me 1 quick second here. Okay. All right, there we go. All right, that's all right. Here we go. All right, stay like this, there, Mr. Computer. Yeah, our internet gets bogged down at this time of day, so it gets a little choppy from time to time. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Well, yeah, I think this is Canadian, this one, but I got it's an old computer, so it's got a shitty video card in it too. All right, guys, thanks for tuning in. I hope you liked the show today. I did myself, and it sounds to me like you did as well.
I had a blast. It was great.
Yeah, awesome. Remember, guys, if you did like the show, remember to share it out there, because sharing is caring, and hit that like button. And if you happen to stumble on this and we're interested in the conversation and you don't sub to me, hit the subscribe button. And we'll see you guys next time. And remember, guys, every time I end one of these things, I always have the same outro, and it's called faith because it's not knowledge.